Hello and welcome to Cliff Reviews Art House. This time I'm reviewing the film The Smashing Machine, directed by Safdie. I'm not completely sure what I think about this film. It sits between two things at once. On the one hand, a sports biopic with the classic rise, fall, redemption narrative. On the other, a more serious character study of obsession, addiction, and the fragility of relationships. It never really commits to either path, and the result for me was an uneasy hybrid that left me never feeling fully engaged with this film. To be honest, I never really cared about the characters. In a loose sense I did. Mark Kerr, played by Dwayne Johnson, is likeable. He can be really charming, like the scene in the doctor's surgery where he speaks with an old woman and a boy. But on the whole, I always felt that Kerr was detached from the people around him, but also from me, the audience. That distance, that coldness is perhaps intentional. Safdie clearly didn't want to offer audiences a Rocky-style rush of triumph and inspiration. There's no heroic training montages, no cathartic victories. The film avoids most of the cliches of the genre, and in that sense it was perhaps aiming for something different. But avoiding cliches is not the same as finding something deeper. The fight scenes, for example, are violent enough, yet strangely muted, drained of energy. They all seem very short rather than giving us any kind of spectacle. That said, we do get a kind of Rocky-style training sequence set to Elvis singing My Way. As I say, I had the feeling that this film can't decide what it's trying to do. Much of the discussion has centred on Dwayne Johnson's performance. This is The Rock stripped of his usual charisma, recast as a serious actor. Some have already touted him as Oscar-worthy, yet I couldn't decide if he really pulled it off. It certainly is fascinating to watch him try, the comedy action star working against his own image. But for me, something was missing. It's a performance that feels important, but not entirely convincing. Emily Blunt, meanwhile, is as strong as ever, but her role felt too thin to provide the film with the emotional depth that I think it badly needs. The domestic drama, which could have given the story its anchor, felt a bit underwritten and ends up more sketch than study. The whole film, in fact, feels a bit undernourished. It gestures at the psychology of obsession and the cost of addiction, but it never really digs deep enough to be truly moving. I never felt close to Mark Kerr as a character. I observed him coldly, but never cared as much as I should have. Perhaps that's partly my lack of interest in MMA. For fans of the sport, the film might resonate differently, especially as a tribute to a fighter that's largely been forgotten. In today's MMA celebrity world, Kerr would be a superstar. Perhaps this film is giving him his day, ensuring that MMA fans will give him the acknowledgement he deserves in terms of what he contributed to this sport. All I can say, though, is that for a non-MMA fan, the film didn't quite work. Okay, perhaps I'm leaning too much towards negativity, because there are moments when the film really does work. After Kerr comes out of treatment, there are some finely observed scenes that capture his fragility and volatility. One in particular stood out, a seemingly trivial dispute over a cactus in the garden, where his irritation at it not being trimmed the way he wanted suddenly flares into anger. The simple passing of a knife back and to between him and Dawn is filled with tension. In these moments, the film conveys both his new sensitivity and the ever-present threat of violence, and it's here that Safdie's restraint pays off. But there wasn't enough of this in the film. Another positive for me was the music. Safdie's choice to work with experimental musician Nala Sinefro gives the film an unexpected edge. Instead of the conventional adrenaline-fueled score you might expect in an MMA movie, we get something closer to avant-garde jazz and electronic soundscapes, often driven by restless percussion. I admired this choice, and this does lean more into art house sensibility rather than sports movie cliché, and in its best moments it lifts the film into a more unsettling textured register. On balance, I didn't dislike this film. It's intriguing and unusual enough. It's occasionally powerful, but it's also uneven, emotionally distant and oddly flat. It's a film that promises depth but never quite delivers. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.